The diner was almost empty when she appeared again. Tiny, pale, wrapped in a frayed pink hoodie. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Sir, are you done with that?" pointing at his half-eaten sandwich. The single dad froze mid-bite. It wasn't the first time she'd asked, but this time, something in her eyes felt different. Broken, desperate, but polite. He handed the plate over gently, pretending not to notice her shaking hands. But when she slipped out the back door into the cold alley, he followed, and what he found there shattered him completely. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos live. The wind outside hit sharp and cold. Ethan Cole, 38, single dad, white auto mechanic, stepped out of the diner's back door, wiping his hands on his jacket. The alley was dim, the kind of place where city lights died before touching the ground. He spotted her immediately. The little girl was crouched behind a dumpster, unwrapping his sandwich with care like it was treasure. Beside her, a woman, mid-30s, white fragile frame, sat with her back against the brick wall, clutching her stomach. Ethan's breath caught. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to scare them. The woman jerked her head up. Her eyes, green but dulled by exhaustion, widened. "Please, don't call the cops. We'll move." Ethan shook his head. No, I'm not." He crouched down. "You're hungry?" The little girl looked at him, sandwich halfway to her mouth. "It's for Mom," she whispered. That hit him like a punch. He noticed the way the woman winced, holding her side as if every breath hurt. Her clothes were neat once, he could tell, but now layered with dirt and cold. Ethan unzipped his jacket and slipped it off. "Here," he said, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. "You look frozen." She blinked, stunned. "You shouldn't." "Yeah, well, my kid would yell at me if I didn't," he said with a small, tired smile. "Name's Ethan." After a long silence, the woman murmured, "Grace." She hesitated, then added, "And this is Lily." Ethan nodded at the girl. "That's a pretty name." The little girl smiled faintly before taking another bite. Grace's voice trembled when she finally spoke again. "We're not like this, usually. I had a job, a home, everything just—" She stopped, pressing her lips tight. He left, took the savings. The landlord changed the locks. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd seen that story before. Different faces, same heartbreak. "Where have you been sleeping?" he asked. Grace looked away. "Here, there. We move before security comes." Something in Ethan snapped. Not anger, but resolve. "That's done," he said firmly. "Come on. You're not sleeping out here tonight." Grace's head shot up. "What? No, we can't." "You can," Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I've got a spare room. It's not much, but it's warm and it's safe." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" Grace's lip trembled. "Why would you do that for strangers?" Ethan sighed. "Because someone once did it for me and my boy. Now it's my turn." The woman's eyes filled, her hand instinctively covering her daughter's. For a moment, she looked like she might say no, but the way her daughter leaned into Ethan's jacket made the choice for her. "Okay," she whispered. "Just for one night." Ethan nodded. "One night, then." He helped Grace to her feet, careful not to make her feel small. The wind carried the faint smell of rain as they walked out of that alley together. The girl clutching her mother's hand, Ethan walking just beside them, his expression unreadable. He didn't know yet that by morning, his quiet act of kindness would expose something far darker than poverty. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about Grace Harper. Ethan's place sat on the edge of town, a small rental with a blue porch light and a squeaky screen door that never learned manners. He unlocked it, stepped aside, and let Grace and Lily go first. The warmth hit them like a wool blanket. The TV glowed softly in the living room. A model rocket leaned in a corner beside a bin of Hot Wheels. A boy with shaggy brown hair and sleepy eyes peeked from the hallway, rubbing his face with a sleeve. "Dad?" "Hey, champ," Ethan said, gentling his voice. "This is Grace and Lily. They're guests tonight." The boy straightened, manners kicking in. "I'm Noah. Hi." He was 11, all elbows and sincerity. "You can have my room if you want," he added too fast, like he needed them to know he was a good person. Grace's mouth trembled. "That's so kind. We won't." "Noah's couch is a pro," Ethan said, nudging his son with a smile. "It can take a night shift, guest rooms clean, towels on the chair." Lily hovered near the doorway, eyes locked on the bin of cars. "Can I?" "Go for it," Noah said, already kneeling. "The silver one's fastest, but the red one's lucky." He held the red one out. "For tonight, you take lucky." Lily's grin broke like morning over a city skyline. Grace watched, shoulders slowly lowering under Ethan's jacket, as if a weight she couldn't name was finally, briefly, set down. "Tea?" Ethan asked. Grace nodded. In the kitchen, he filled a kettle and didn't look at her too hard. He knew the look in her eyes, how people staved off panic by pretending to be fine. He let the silence breathe. When the kettle clicked, he poured, slid a mug over. She wrapped both hands around it like it contained directions back to her life. "Your side," he said quietly. "Okay to ask?" Her gaze flicked to the doorway, where the kids' laughter rose. Two simple notes of childhood cutting through the static. Grace took a breath. "I was a receptionist," she said. "Dental office, solid hours. I paid rent on time, every month, for 3 years. Then in March, the landlord sold the building. New company, new rules. They lost my payment record, raised the rent, gave us 7 days." She swallowed, eyes shining. "I fought it. I stayed polite. I believed people would do the right thing if I did. Then my ex found out. She stopped, jaw setting hard. "He offered help if I got back with him. When I said no, someone filed a complaint with CPS claiming I left Lily alone at night. Total lie. I worked days, but the inspection froze my housing application." Her hands shook. "We were locked out by the end of the week." Ethan felt his teeth grind. "You have any paperwork? Emails? Notices?" "In my bag," she said. "But nobody listens when you're here." She gestured to the world of alleys and back doors. "You disappear. That's the trick." "Not here," Ethan said. "Not under my roof." Something steadied in her face, like a boat catching a mooring. Noah's voice came down the hall. "Dad, Lily says she's never seen Cosmo Quest." "That's illegal," Ethan called back. "We better fix it." They all ended up in the living room. Lily wedged between Noah and a pillow army. Grace sat at the end of the couch, one leg tucked under her, Ethan in the armchair, pretending not to notice the way she tracked every sound, like safety was a skittish cat you couldn't look at directly. Halfway through the episode, Lily drifted against her mom's shoulder and slept. Noah's eyes glassed over with drowsy loyalty, and he surrendered to the couch he'd bragged about. The room settled. Ethan clicked the sound low. "Tomorrow," he said, "we hit a few stops. I've got a friend at the community legal clinic, another who runs a garage 2 blocks from your old place. He lets me borrow the lift sometimes. He's got cameras out back. If your ex or the management pulled anything near the lockout, We might have timestamps. You're serious? Grace whispered. Yeah, he said. And my boss has shifts. Front desk in the mornings. It's not dental, but it's honest. You could work until this clears. She blinked at him like the kindness itself hurt. Why are you doing this? Because a long time ago, he said, looking at Noah, I was drowning. And somebody stood on the shore and made space for me to climb out instead of calling me a fool for falling in. Grace nodded carefully, swallowing gratitude like it might spill if she moved too fast. Thank you, Ethan. He shrugged. We're neighbors until proven otherwise. Later, after blankets and lights and the soft diplomacy of good nights, Ethan washed 2 mugs and stared out the window at the blue porch light. His jaw worked. He had been a single dad long enough to recognize true fear, the kind that doesn't go away just because you mean well. In the morning, the house woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Lily's laugh ricocheting off walls the way a laugh should. Grace tried to help. Ethan swatted her away with a spatula and a point at the seat. Customers sit. House rules. While the kids devoured breakfast, Grace pulled a zippered pouch from her bag, letters, emails printed at a library, a folded notice with a red stamp that might as well have been a wound. Ethan scanned quickly, eyes narrowing. Here. He tapped a paragraph. They can't give 7 days after changing lease terms without certified proof you were served and a grace period under the state statute. The dates don't match. How do you know that? Grace asked. I once cracked a radiator that wasn't mine, he said. Spent 6 months learning everything about small claims court whether I wanted to or not. A wry smile. Turns out rules apply to landlords too, even when they forget. They split the day like a mission. First stop, Ethan's garage. His boss, Dave, a barrel-chested guy with coffee for blood, took one look at Lily's eager face and handed her a stack of shop stickers. Only if you promise to stick 'em on your own stuff, Minnie, he said sternly. She nodded with solemn delight. To Grace, he said, front counter's open 3 mornings a week. It's mostly calls, receipts, telling people their breaks are not optional. You up for that? Yes, she said too fast. Then softer. Yes, thank you. Paperwork's paperwork, Dave said. We'll square it. Second stop. The legal clinic. A woman named John with a bob haircut and a stare that could cut rebar listened to Grace's story without blinking, then peppered her with gentle, precise questions. She photocopied everything, flagged the violation Ethan had noticed, and scheduled a hearing request. We'll also file for a stay on any collections, she said. If your ex fabricated a CPS complaint, that's criminal. We'll request the report anonymously and see who filed. Grace exhaled slowly, a sound like a rope loosening. Third stop. The alley behind Grace's old building. Ethan's friend Marco, owner of the neighboring garage, pulled footage on his office monitor, sliding the timeline with a mechanic's patient hands. Day of the lockout? He asked. Grace gave the date. No, I'm sorry. It was April 1st. It felt like a joke. She grimaced. Bad one. They watched the screen. A building manager taped a notice to Grace's door. 2 men in a van carried boxes to the curb. Grace and Lily arrived, Grace arguing with a man in a cheap tie. He pointed to a clipboard. She pointed to a calendar. Then a figure hovered at the frame's edge, tall, hoodie up, phone out. He filmed, then walked away. Can you zoom? Ethan asked. Marco hunched forward. Not a movie. Man! But he sharpened the image enough to catch a profile as the guy turned at the corner. A jawline, a clipped ear, a tattoo crawling from under the sleeve. Grace sucked in air. That's him, she whispered. Eric. Ex? Ethan asked. She nodded, cheeks flushing with a cocktail of shame and fury. He told me he'd make sure I needed him. I didn't believe. Her voice cracked and she swallowed the rest. Marco, Ethan said, can you export that clip for the clinic? Already on a drive, Marco said, yanking out a USB stick like a magician pulling scarves. As they stepped back into light, Lily slipped her hand into Ethan's. He looked down, surprised, then squeezed gently. The way you return a trust you don't deserve yet, but will. All the way home, Grace was quiet, shoulders back, eyes forward. Not broken, bracing. Ethan recognized the posture. It's what people wore when they chose not to drown. That night, after dinner dishes and homework and Lily insisting Noah teach her the sacred art of Hot Wheels loop physics, Grace stood at the sink, hands in soapy water she'd insisted on managing. You didn't have to do any of this, she said, not looking up. Neither did you, Ethan said. Neither did I what? Still be the kind of mom who asks for leftovers with a please and a thank you so her kid can eat first. He folded a dish towel. That's rare. She swallowed, eyes suddenly glassy. He said I was weak. He's wrong, Ethan said, and I think he's about to find out. Grace nodded once. Good, she whispered. I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Ethan's porch held more shoes than a small wedding. People kept showing up, quietly, like news spreads when it's about decency. Dave sent over a used desk for Grace's corner at the garage. John from the clinic came by with an envelope and a smile like a verdict. Marco delivered a cheap doorbell camera he'd accidentally billed to an inventory overage. The blue porch light shone on everything like a lighthouse. Grace had started at the garage, 8 a.m. sharp, her voice steady on calls. Hi, this is Cole Auto. How can I help you today? She was good. Customers stayed to chat without realizing they never had before. Lily and Noah walked to school together, comparing math scars and cafeteria rumors. In the afternoons, they built blanket forts that OSHA would absolutely not approve. The day of the hearing, Ethan drove Grace to the courthouse and waited outside the small room with the plastic chairs and the clock that lied. She went in with John, shoulders straight. She came out with a paper in her hand and her mouth trembling at the corners. Well? Ethan asked, standing so fast the chair complained. We won, she said, disbelieving at first, then letting the word land. They reversed the lockout. The rent increase was void. They have to restore access and cut a check for damages. She stopped because her voice cracked on that last word. Ethan whooped softly and hugged her before he could decide if it was allowed. It was. She held on a second longer than strangers do. When they parted, her eyes were bright and sharp. John also pulled the CPS record, she said. Anonymous complaint from a prepaid number. But the timestamp matches the video frame when Eric stood in the hall. Grace's jaw set. Jan says it's enough for a report. They'll investigate. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for stop. Stop is a good kind of revenge, Ethan said. It's what decent people call it. They drove back with the windows cracked and the radio low. The city looked different to Grace, though nothing had changed. Buildings taller, streets wider, sky less heavy. That's what hope does, she thought. It lifts the ceiling. Outside the house, a cardboard box waited with a note in a tidy hand. From the Tuesday moms at school, extra groceries this week, we heard. Grace pressed the box to her chest like it was a heart she could borrow until hers settled. Inside, the kids exploded into the kitchen like confetti. Well? Noah asked, practically vibrating. We won, Grace said. And Lily squealed so loud, the the windows considered resigning. She climbed Grace like a tree, laughing and crying, and Grace laughed and cried back, and Ethan stood in the doorway, wondering how joy always looked like the thing you'd been searching for in a thrift store and finally found. That evening, while pasta steamed and the porch light painted the front steps blue, the doorbell camera pinged Ethan's phone. A figure lingered at the edge of the frame, hood up, posture that cocky slouch Ethan had learned to dislike on sight. Ethan stepped outside before the second ping. "Can I help you?" Eric pushed back his hood. He was mid-30s, the kind of handsome that goes dull when it's used like a weapon. "I'm here for my family," he said, as if lines practiced in mirrors worked on porches. "Grace belongs with me." "No," Grace said from behind Ethan, voice flat as a judge's gavel. "I belong where I'm safe. That's not you." Eric's eyes cut to Ethan. "So, this your hero now? Guy with a porch light? You think you're better than me?" "No," Ethan said. "But I know the law a little. And I know the neighborhood. You filed a false report. You stalked them on lockout day. There's footage. There's a hearing transcript. There's a community that actually knows their names." Eric laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people do when they're checking the exits. "You can't prove?" Ethan held up his phone, screen glowing with the paused clip Marco pulled, the timestamp matching Jan's paperwork. "We can." The door opened down the block. Marco leaned against his fence, arms folded. Two other neighbors stepped onto their porches like the street was a chorus and the cue had been given. Not a mob, a community. Nobody moved forward. Nobody shouted. They just stood there. Like witnesses, Grace stepped past Ethan, chin high. "Here's what happens next," she said evenly. "You leave. The clinic files their report in the morning. If you come near me or Lily again, I'll have a protective order by noon. If you want to be part of Lily's life someday, you'll start by apologizing to a room full of adults who can read dates on a calendar. Then you'll show up with receipts and patience. Until then, stop." Eric's face twitched. The fight he'd worn as cologne lost its scent. "You'll regret this," he said. But it sounded like a line from a bad show he didn't quite believe. "No," Grace said softly. "I already regret what I tolerated. I'm done with that." He backed away, muttered something about lawyers he didn't have, and disappeared around the corner. Porches exhaled. Doors clicked shut. The night came back to itself. Ethan turned to Grace. "You okay?" She let out a breath she might have been holding since the day the lock changed. "I will be," she said. Then, after a beat, "Thank you. Not for the footage. For the porch." He smiled. Porches are underrated. Weeks rolled. The building's management, suddenly attentive, offered a corrected lease as if they'd just discovered decency in a storage room. Grace read every line twice, then said no. "We'll find somewhere new," she decided, not from fear but from clarity. Not all fresh starts begin where you were wronged. Dave upped her hours. Customers started asking for Grace by name, the way people do when your voice becomes their routine. On Thursdays, she took a late lunch and walked to the school for Lily's reading circle. She sat cross-legged on a carpet square, laughing at the same jokes every week as if they were new. Because for Lily, they were. One Saturday, the diner where it began was slow enough to hear the ice machine breathing. The waitress, Maria, spotted Grace at a booth with Lily and Noah and waved with her pen. "Hey there, stranger. Got a place now?" "Working on it," Grace said. "But we've got more than we did." Ethan slid into the booth with a plate of fries he didn't pretend were for anyone but the kids. Maria leaned in. "You know, we've got a community board by the register," she said. "Folks post jobs, rooms, babysitting gigs. It ain't fancy, but it works." She glanced at Grace's careful eyes and added, "Your coffee's always on me, for as long as you want it to be." "Why?" Grace asked, not suspicious, just still amazed. Maria shrugged. "Because once, when I was down bad, a lady at the bus stop handed me her umbrella and said, 'Keep it. Storm's longer than your ride.' Been trying to return that umbrella for 15 years. Grace smiled, and it reached her eyes now. Not like a visitor, but like a resident. "I'll take the coffee, and I'll pay it forward." "Deal." By summer, the house with the blue porch light had a new habit. Saturday potlucks. People brought too much food and not enough Tupperware. Kids wove between folding chairs like satellites. Someone always played guitar slightly out of tune. Grace made a pasta salad that became local legend. Noah taught Lily to ride a bike, running beside her down the quiet street until she looked back and realized he'd let go and she wasn't falling. One evening, when the sun scraped gold along the roofs and fireflies argued philosophy in the shrubs, Grace stood beside Ethan on the porch and watched their stitched-together life move like a living thing. She nudged him with her shoulder. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Hit me." "I got the call," she said, eyes wide, like this was the part where the sky opened. "A dental clinic across town, full-time, benefits. They heard I kept an auto shop from scheduling itself into a black hole and decided I could handle teeth." Ethan's grin was huge and stupid. "You did it?" "No," she said, and her voice went soft. "We did." He tipped an imaginary hat. "Then we should celebrate. I make a mean sheet cake in an average speech." She held his gaze, and something unspoken, but not unclear, moved between them. The kind of thing you don't rush because you respect it too much to scare it. "Maybe start with the cake," she said, smiling. At bedtime, Lily paused at the porch steps, staring at the blue light. "Mom?" "Yeah, Bug? Are we home?" Grace looked at the light, at Ethan washing bowls inside, at Noah showing a neighbor kid how to do the loop without losing the car, at a community that had learned each other's names on purpose. She took Lily's hand. "Yeah," she said. "I think we are." And in a town that had almost taught her to disappear, Grace learned the opposite lesson. That kindness isn't charity. It's architecture. It builds a place where people can stand. It's a porch light that says, "Without fanfare, here you are. I see you. Come in from the dark." Ethan locked the door behind them and turned off the kitchen light, leaving the blue glow to hold the night. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Somewhere beyond that, someone laughed. And right here, for once, everything felt exactly the size it should be. The next morning, the porch filled with shoes again. Because once a storm ends, people still come by. Not to rescue, but to belong. And that, in the end, was the quiet, lasting revenge against every person and policy that had tried to make Grace small. Not a headline. A home.